When she saw that blonde guy, when she saw that he came with such a bouquet of flowers, roses, I mean, what woman wouldn't just melt? Hi, welcome to another episode of Criminalny Patrol. Well, this is of course the Bernatka footbridge in Krakow, a symbolic place because you could call it the Lover's Footbridge. That's why there are these padlocks here. There aren't many now, because recently the Krakow City Road Authority probably removed tons of these various padlocks from here. New ones keep appearing, but as we know, such a padlock is a symbol of lasting, sealed love. The key is thrown into the water, and since some of our episodes refer to such important things, I would say to important days in the calendar. Well, soon it's the 14th of May, February, and as we know, February 14th is Valentine's Day. Saint Valentine's Day has been celebrated in Poland for many years, and on that day, people in love give each other various gifts and presents as a sign that they love each other. Today, we're referring to this kind of thing, to Saint Valentine's Day, and everything connected with it. But this episode is also about making good choices when looking for a partner. I invite you to watch the next episode, subtitles by whitefernia.pl.
Watch special episodes as well as regular episodes without ads on Hero What? Criminalny Patrol.
Everything takes place in Tichy, a fairly large city, as you know, with about 125,000 residents in Silesia. Hanna lives there, a girl who is above all a Polish businesswoman, a resourceful girl who knows how to do business and goes through life with this kind of passion. She has a very successful beauty salon, she's independent, and she also lives upstairs from her beauty salon on Orzeszkowa Street, right there in Tichy, and her business is doing well. She also really likes turquoise, the color turquoise in general, and in some way it's also a marker of her life. This is important because turquoise comes up again later, in a completely different context, but it does appear again. She likes turquoise. When she was still not Hanna but Hania, a little girl, she took part in various art contests, she drew, she painted, and basically everything was in those turquoise colors. She said it usually reminded her of vacations, of being free. She loved that color, even in her apartment, in her room. Everything was in those turquoise colors, and that was her passion, those turquoises painting. And her second passion was sports. She really was an extremely athletic girl, and I would also say determined in life, but in a positive way. She often said to her mom when she couldn't do something, "Mommy, we can do it." Well, Hanna was considered a so-called good catch in social circles because, yes, she was a beautiful girl, tall and slender. As I said, she did sports, had brown eyes, long hair, and she was a beautician. She also ran a salon, so she was always perfectly made up with her makeup done, and she dyed her hair different colors, sometimes red, sometimes blonde. And on top of that, the beauty salon she owned was doing really well, so she was a good catch. Well, I think a lot of guys just dream about a woman like that. But as for her, well, she definitely knew her own strengths. She knew that people liked her, but that's how she talked about it. I'm 24 years old, everything is ahead of me. So I'm mainly focused on making money, business, and that's what interests me the most. There's even a post like that before New Year's Eve 2012. She made a list like people usually do for the next year. And in that post, in her notes, she wrote something like this: that she wants to grow her company, invest in herself, have a good relationship with her nephew, and most importantly, no men. That was her resolution for the upcoming year 2013, the end. With resolutions. As it usually goes, we all know very well, but Hanna enters the new year 2013, as I said, with that very resolution. No men. It's January 11th, well, 2 weeks have passed. Her friend says they should go out somewhere to some place. It would be a girls' night out. They'll sit, have a few drinks, talk, gossip. Hanna didn't really like the idea because she was very tired. You know, that New Year's period, the holiday season, lots of clients. She was exhausted, but her friend was persuading her, so for the sake of peace and friendship, she agreed. She decided that she would go to the club with her friends. She wasn't really in the mood to party, and that's how it was. She said, "All right, I'll go with you, but I'll be the designated driver." She took her car, she thought. Her friends went to the club. She even bought them a drink. While they were drinking, she went to the bar, sat there, and watched. Two men stood next to her. One was a blonde guy, I'd say the kind women definitely like. Slim, athletic, elegant, well-dressed. He had two advantages. As Hanna said, first of all, he looked a lot like her brother, and she simply liked her brother. And secondly, he was wearing a tie. Well, the tie was in a turquoise color, which, as you remember, was Hanna's favorite color. So she simply noticed that blonde guy and probably thought to herself that he was a nice guy, but there was nothing between them. They didn't even talk to each other. I don't think they even looked at each other. She took her friends, went back home, and nothing happened for 2 days. But on January 13th, which was 2 days later, she saw that the same blonde guy was entering her beauty salon. In a turquoise tie, but he had a beautiful bouquet of red flowers, and those flowers were obviously for her, as she insisted. When she saw that blonde guy, when she saw that he came with such a bouquet of flowers, roses, what woman wouldn't just melt word by word? She decided that despite those reservations, despite that New Year's resolution, she would go for it and let them become partners. And indeed, that blonde guy in the turquoise tie and Hanna became a couple. Well, definitely from another point of view, Michał, because that's the name of the blonde guy with the turquoise tie. Importantly, this Michał, as Hanna thought, went to a lot of trouble to find her. Well, in my opinion, he didn't really go to that much trouble. Because Hanna went to that meeting, to that girls' night, simply in her company car, and on that company car there was both the address of her beauty salon and the phone number, so all he had to do was just go outside, wait, and see which car Hanna got into. And that might seem unlikely, but it turned out that Michał simply lived on the same street, which is Orzeszkowa Street. And it looked like he simply knew her before. But either way, did Hanna still believe that he could be the one? Well, Michał wasn't completely honest even then because he was hiding the fact that he still had a wife and a daughter. I would say that the idyll lasted for half a year, for 6 months. Shared dinners, going out together, candles, looking into each other's eyes, trips. It was wonderful. Half a year was wonderful. So Hanna said after 6 months, since it's so wonderful, there's nothing stopping me from moving into his apartment. And that's what happens. She leaves her own apartment and moves in with Michał. It should also be said that Michał made an impression for another reason. Young, elegant, we already know that, and on top of that, well educated. He graduated from the Salesian University of Technology, and he was from Łaziska Górne. Apparently, when he wrote his thesis, it was an example of how high the level was, how very high the standard was. Apparently, he wrote a thesis. That thesis was an example of the level of how high the standard was. Of the money that is earned in state-owned companies, so he could literally afford everything: branded clothes, outfits, suits, beautiful expensive cars. He rented a 2-level apartment himself. On top of all that, he invited Hanna to restaurants, not just any places, but the top-tier ones. He ordered the most expensive dishes and drinks. Every woman dreams of a guy like that, so to speak, because life with a man like that seems like something out of a fairy tale. Of course, at some point, even before she moved into his apartment, Hanna decided that it was appropriate to introduce Michał to her parents. I would say Michał didn't really make an impression on Hanna's parent. They were more experienced in life, more down to earth, and they saw that Michał was, in a way, a bit of a dreamer, just sitting there staring, gazing at Hanna, as her mother put it. It's hard to make any real contact with him. He's a bit detached from reality. But maybe he's just looking, observing. He's focused on Hanna. Well, that's just a period of being in love, and maybe there's nothing strange about it after all. Well, when they started living together, after some time it turned out that what Hanna initially took as a good sign wasn't really that. That Michał wanted her to spend all her free time with him, to always be around him, to sit with him, to talk to him. He wouldn't allow her to even go out on her own, to go out with her friends, to spend time somewhere just for herself. There was no way she could have a girls' night out, like the one where she first saw him, when she was walking down the street with him and said hi to some guy friend. He would start getting nervous, upset that she said hi to him. This situation kept getting worse and worse. There were situations because there were all kinds of family events like weddings where they were together. He wouldn't allow it either because he was jealous that Hanna, for example, wanted to dance with her brother or her uncle. You could see that he was constantly surrounding her with some kind of strange web, that she was becoming enslaved, that she couldn't make any move. On top of that, he kept telling her that he was making a lot of money, that the money would be enough for both of them. He just wanted her to quit her job, give up the beauty salon, and live together off his money. But you know, Hanna was an extremely ambitious girl. She wanted to grow, she wanted to develop the salon. For her, the salon was also a big part of her life. So she absolutely didn't want to agree to that. And because of this, arguments started happening as well. Well, Hanna felt that things were getting worse and worse, but how could she? A woman in love didn't do anything about it for now. She thought that maybe it would resolve itself, that it was just a temporary situation, that once he felt she was faithful to him, that they were together, he would change his behavior. She didn't say anything, but she suffered, probably in silence. She also didn't want to worry her parents because for her, it's a failure too. But her parents noticed that she was acting strange, that she didn't look well. She has dark circles under her eyes, but it turned out that these weren't just from lack of sleep, they were real bruises. Probably also because she had been beaten, so they started talking to her. After a while, she admitted that, in fact, things weren't good, that her beloved Michał, that elegant, wealthy guy, was supposed to be the man of her dreams. That when he comes home, he just grabs a bottle of vodka, sits down and drinks. He's simply a chronic alcoholic, that he does it every day, and the more he drinks, the more aggressive he becomes. And when he gets aggressive, he starts beating her. And then there are fights, shouting, and that's when the neighbors call the police. So it was clear from this that the situation was really tense. This is a moment, a dilemma, I think, for many women, what to do, whether to stay and keep fighting for this love, or maybe to leave. Hanna, like most, was probably still fighting, believing that maybe, well, the situation would simply change. Despite the fact that there were more and more arguments, they kept happening, and they were getting more and more aggressive. In some way, both families started to get involved too, Hanna's family and Michał's family, because after all, they also knew about the relationship. Michał's parents, in their own way, tried to explain their son's behavior. They were more inclined to suggest that she should wait it out, endure it, that once he became more certain of her love, he would probably change, that he was actually a good guy. While Hanna thought she did what she could. At some point, however, Hanna decided that there was no chance, that this relationship just had to end. And in December 2014, or how do you see it? She endured quite a lot though, packed her suitcases and returned to her own apartment. Michał, of course, didn't give up. As soon as Hanna returned to her own place, to her apartment, he no longer had such direct contact with her, but he kept sending text messages, dozens of them. Every few minutes he would send another message. They were extreme. Sometimes he threatened her, insulted her, and other times he talked about how he loved her, assuring her of his love. Well, those text messages were all kinds of things. He would often drive up to her house, to the beauty salon, look in, and when he saw she was no longer at the salon, the beauty salon, then he would go to her parents' house, thinking she was there, and she actually was, and all the time it was either threats or promises of love. He showed up again at Hanna's house because he knew or felt that she was there. Christmas Eve, the 24th. December. This time he changed his tactics. Through the door, he said, he asked to be let in, that he understood that after all it's Christmas Eve, and on Christmas Eve people talk, forgive, and he would like to be forgiven. And indeed the family let him in, everyone was there, even Mr. Jan, Hanna's father, took him aside for a talk. Michał told him that he understood his mistake, he understands everything, he wants to change. He will go to what Hanna's father suggested, that he should just go to therapy, some kind of rehab, to get his life together. Michał said that's what he'll do, that he'll get treatment, that he loves Hanna, and he'd like everything to go back to the way it was, for Hanna to just come back to him. They even had Christmas Eve dinner together. They sat down at the table. It seemed like maybe things would be okay, but they weren't, because the very next day, Michał was doing exactly the same thing. He was aggressive, he would come in, threaten customers, again. He had a lot of information about what Hanna was doing. Well, it's not out of the question that he somehow installed a bug for her. Maybe that bug was in the car, maybe it was in the beauty salon. She herself said that she felt strangely cornered, that everywhere she went or planned to go, this Michał would show up there, as if he knew she would just be there. And sometimes these are stories, I would say, arranged on the spot, in real time, not written in any calendar. He could actually have been eavesdropping on her, and she was aware of it. There were also some bizarre situations because if she didn't want him to find out, she would simply write information to her clients on a piece of paper. They would read it, and they wouldn't speak to each other. Sitting in her beauty salon, you have to agree it's a bizarre situation. This went on for a while, and at some point she couldn't take it anymore and went to the police. That's a kind of problem in these kinds of cases. We've talked about it. And it turned out that basically the police's actions came down to giving her a phone number and telling her to just call if she felt threatened. Not much, especially since there had already been signs before that Michał could be aggressive. This was already the year 2012. Because in 2012 he was arrested for drunk driving, but also for beating up 2 police officers. But it also turned out why his first wife left him. She left him because she had what is called a blue card, which means he abused her. But that scenario was exactly the same as in his relationship with Hanna. He was morbidly, even obsessively jealous of his first wife, hence the arguments and the threats. What's more, he even did that to his first wife when he was already with Hanna. So it was clear that he was a man who doesn't forgive, who is vengeful, and a man who will obsessively pursue some goal of his, one that is meant to hurt another person. And then that day came, February 14th, Valentine's Day, the day we started today's episode with. Hanna felt from the morning that on this day, well, Valentine's Day, she definitely wouldn't have any peace from Michał. And indeed, he showed up during the day before noon. He showed up in the living room. He had a beautiful, once again beautiful bouquet of red roses, once again declaring his love, but besides those roses, he also had an expensive gift. It was a pendant with a heart, and the heart was decorated with little crystals. Swarovski. Well, it definitely wasn't just a small gift that people usually give each other, but a really lavish present. She didn't want to accept all of this. He left it and just walked away. She told him she'd come by in the evening and simply give the present back to him. Then she went to the hairdresser, and he was already sending his texts. She still didn't have any peace. She couldn't even get her hair done in peace. But somehow the day passed, and Hanna was supposed to come back home. But Hanna didn't come home. Her parents started looking for her. They called, but there was no result. Her phone was silent. They thought, it's February 14th, Valentine's Day. She's an adult woman. So they assumed maybe she's at someone's place. They decided to wait, not to raise any unnecessary alarm, and waited until the next day. They also checked her apartment. She wasn't there, so they decided to go to Michał's apartment. When they went inside, he had a mezzanine. They entered and saw that the belt from his pants and the belt from his bathrobe were tied together. He's hanging. Michał simply threw the belt over the mezzanine and then hanged himself. It was a shock. They went inside and the shock was even greater. On the bed lay dead Hanna. She hadn't even had time to undress. She was still in her clothes. The parents, in all this, in their nerves and shock, of course, notified the police. The routine procedures began, inspecting the entire apartment. Hannah's body was taken for an autopsy, and it turned out that she had received 2 stab wounds. One stab was to the heart, the other was to the liver. Presumably, it looked like he was waiting for her with the knife, and as soon as she entered the room, he started stabbing her. Well, Hanna died on the spot, also in a very characteristic way. She had something in her hands, just as she was lying on that bed. A photo pressed in her hands. Is it a photo from a vacation or some romantic moment? In that photo, of course, it's her and Michał, both of them smiling. It all looked like this. After Michał killed her, the police figured it out later. He went to the casino, stayed there for quite a while, drank a lot, and then, as usual, returned to the apartment. When he put that photo in her hands, he hanged himself afterward. Of course, it was a shock for both families because it was also a shock for Michał's family. It's an incredible tragedy. There were quite a few people at Hanna's funeral, friends, colleagues, and of course family. They also read a letter. This letter, more or less, some of these sentences or words went like this, sounded like this. Dear daughter, you didn't have luck in love. You were with us and you will be. This is what, as we assume, Hanna's parents wrote. And so this story ends tragically, a story somehow connected to February 14th, but as you can see, also connected in a tragic way. Of course, we're talking about this more in the context of choosing partners wisely. As my grandma used to say, not everything that glitters is gold, and you have to remember that. And yes, of course, let February 14th remain a day for lovers, but for those truly in love. And that's all for today's episode. Of course, subscribe to our channel and of course, take care.
Watch special episodes as well as regular episodes without ads on herohero.co/criminalni patrol.